Welcome, LinkedIn. For anyone who is tuning in live today, I'm here with Seònaid Ó Murchadha, and I'm actually dialing in from Tenerife. This is my first time to go live from Tenerife, and very exciting. And yeah, hopefully no tech issues or anything like that while I do this. And I am conscious of a big shadow on my face. That's because I have my laptop propped up so that I can kind of look directly at the camera, and more so than anything else. And we are here today, probably for the next 10 minutes or so, to chat about the most recent episode of the podcast, which came out on Friday last week. And Seònaid was my guest on the podcast, talking all things disability and how to drive disability inclusion in the workplace. Seònaid, would you like to introduce yourself, and we can get talking about the kind of some of the key points that we covered on the podcast?
So, my name is Seònaid Ó Murchadha, and it's so lovely to chat to you again, Aoife. And I'm so jealous that you're in Tenerife. You can only have a shadow on your face if there's actually sunshine. There's only cloud
Well, yes.
here, so I have electronic light making me look horrendous. But yeah, Seònaid is my name. Impossible to spell and harder to remember. That's why I end up
I
using
can
the
absolutely
Bionic
relate to
Woman.
that.
The Bionic Woman is my moniker. That's what I am on LinkedIn, anyway, for sure. But what I do is help organizations with their disability management issues, and in particular, their inclusion issues around disability. I know on the podcast we talked an awful lot about disclosure, and the workshop I was doing just before we met up was actually talking about disclosure, but with a group of disabled people who are looking for work. So that was really interesting as well, to explore the whole area and the comfort level that we have and how we talk about disability, and the kind of
Yeah,
internalized ability bias that we all have,
yeah,
against
yeah,
disability, but it's all a negative
yeah,
thing. And of course, then
yeah.
before that, talking to a group of disabled women, all about how disabled women are just not included when it comes to women's issues. So it was really, really, and that's what I do. So I had an
Yeah.
interesting morning, but it's all about managing disability, making disability a normal part of life, because that's what it is. It isn't
Mm,
extraordinary.
yeah,
It's just,
yeah,
it's plain ordinary.
yeah, exactly. And I'm not sure that we directly covered this on the podcast, but I'm sure on one of my previous episodes, it was something like 90% of people at some point in their life are going to have a disability. And there's age-related disabilities and things like that, as our eyesight and our hearing starts to go. There's all sorts of statistics around that. And we definitely did cover on the podcast the fact that there's um, it's when we talk about inclusion, disability is often the one that's not really talked about. It's the kind of one that's often shied away from. We're not comfortable talking about it because maybe we don't understand enough about it, what it means, exactly what we're talking about, the disclosure and the accommodations that we need to make when people have disabilities at work as well. Do you want to kind of touch on some of those points?
Oh, I mean, there's so much to even chat about, even within that. I mean, I think
Listen to the
that's
full
part of it.
podcast.
It's the lack of understanding of
Mm,
the intersectionality.
yes.
It is that lack of understanding of the
Mm,
intersectionality of disability, and the fact that when we think about disability, we only think of it in one particular way. And that's always what I love challenging people about. And I love when you talk about the imposter syndrome, because that's every disabled
mm,
person ever, because of the way that society treats us. You know, we're
yeah.
looking at the International Women's Day, and their theme is break the bias. But in everything to do with women, there's huge bias around women with disabilities. We're not seen as people who can be mothers. We're not seen as, you know, people who can do all of the various things we can do. So I think
Mm,
that's sometimes part of the challenge, is we have to break our own
yeah.
biases, and think about how to challenge our own imposter syndrome in this area. If
Yeah.
you're not going to be
It's
comfortable about disability in yourself, how could you possibly
mm,
embrace it in the workplace?
yeah. It's a funny one because when you bring that up, Sean, it like to me, it sounds less like imposter syndrome and more like the environment that society has created around disability and disabled people. Because it's, and there was this really interesting article that came out last year, and I kind of disagreed with a lot of the points that it made. But what it was talking about was like, stop telling women that they have imposter syndrome, because they don't necessarily have imposter syndrome if you've created this environment in which women can't succeed. That you have this environment where actually
Well,
we can't reach
I
those
mean,
kind of
there is
higher
that.
levels. Oh, I
Sorry, there
think
was a
there's a
bit of a
delay.
delay on my side.
No worries at all. The joys of going live. But no, I mean, I was finished talking, so go ahead.
What I was just going to say is it mightn't seem, and I think there's definitely a part of it, whereas every policy that we write, every action that government does isn't equality proofed. I mean, this is something that we see all of the time. But I think recently there was an article about how visually impaired people are being asked to do antigen tests, but they're not accessible. We're often
Right. Okay.
asked
Yeah. Yeah.
to
Yeah.
engage in a variety of different things in our environments that aren't accessible to us. So it's the
Yeah.
two sides of it. Internally,
Yeah.
because we might have a negative attitude to disability, when we acquire it or when we meet it in the workplace, we don't know how to deal with it. And as a
Hmm.
result, if you acquire a disability and you have that ability bias, that's embedded in you through society,
Yeah.
through culture, through media representation, everything, because you feel that way. You feel, well, I can't be a leader. I can't be somebody that people can look up to, and I can't be as
Hmm.
effective as I possibly could be because I'm disabled.
Yeah.
So it's both
Okay.
sides of it that
Yeah.
conspire to make this
Yeah.
area one that people have to put their serious po face on.
Yeah.
That, oh,
And
I'm going to talk about disability, let's get serious.
yeah. 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 And is it about having those role models at work then? Is that something, do you think, that would help?
And everywhere. I mean, I don't know if you watched Strictly Come Dancing, and we were hooked. And I really wanted Rose Ailing Ellis to win. So basically, Strictly Come Dancing, it's the show where they dance with, where sort of B-list stars dance with professional dancers.
Yeah.
Dancing with the Stars
Yeah.
is the Irish version, and I've yet to catch up on that.
Okay.
But on the UK
Okay.
one, just before Christmas. So it's all glitter, sparkles, and Christmas. So it was just fantastic to be able to watch it. But one of the finalists was a woman called Rose Ailing Ellis, who's an actress, I think, on, I want to say EastEnders, but I'm not 100% sure. And she's deaf. So the
Right.
beauty of it was that everybody in the whole show started just using sign language as normal. So they started saying thank you,
Oh,
which is basically,
wow.
taking your hand and just saying thank you from your chin. And they just started doing it normally and naturally. And she went on to win. Now, I really wanted her to win, but I was also devastated
Yeah.
because it meant I mightn't ever see her because her level of fame is going to increase and we won't be able to
Okay.
afford to have her ever at an event.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But the beauty of it
The
was it was it was a role model. It was media representation. It was normalizing the beauty of her deafness and her use of
hmm,
British Sign Language. And she did
yeah.
one dance that I recommend you go back and see if possible. She did one dance where in the middle of it, the music completely stopped and it was completely silent and she continued dancing with a professional
Oh,
partner. And she
wow.
was demonstrating to the rest of us here in community that's what she lives with.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
about counting in her head. So her
Yeah.
superpower is to be able to dance without music. And
I've got
for
goosebumps
me,
now from that.
that is the representation we need.
Yeah. Yeah. If you could
You have
find
to go
a
back and
link,
watch it, even if you're not a
yes.
fan of
No, I was going to
sparkles and
say, if you
glitter
could
and
find a
dancing.
link to that, if you could find a link to that, Seònaid, and put it in the comments below. The link for anyone who's watching now, this, sometimes people assume that this is the actual podcast. This is not the podcast. This is us talking live about the podcast. But the podcast episode link is in the comments below. If you have any questions now for either of us, please, you can pop them below and we would be happy to answer them live. Or if you're watching the replay, you can pop the questions below and we can have a look back at them afterwards as well.
So I'm currently looking up Rose and Giovanni Silent Dance, and that's bringing it up.
Okay, brilliant, brilliant.
I'll see if I can pop it into the chat somehow. I don't want it to go
Yeah.
off in the background with the music.
Brilliant. I think
So yeah,
a
they're the
couple
type
of
of
the
that's the media
things.
representation we need.
Yeah. Okay. So media representation. So role models, not just in the workplace, but kind of in society in general. A couple of the things that kind of struck me in our conversation was around this idea of disclosure, first of all, and then the accommodations that are required and how people deal with accommodation requests and how to make those accommodations at work as well. They're kind of the two things that really struck me. Do you want to maybe touch on those briefly just before we wrap things up?
I mean, really, when I was still, sorry, I'm still looking for that video. Can you give me that again? I mean, really, when we're talking about disclosure, it's
Yes.
from the company side or from the individual side?
I suppose
The
it's
company
creating
side,
that in,
essentially.
well, it's for me, it's creating that environment where people feel that it's okay to disclose, so creating that environment in an organization where an individual feels safe to
The
disclose.
biggest, the biggest, the biggest issue is to create that culture of openness. Is really the
Yeah,
best way to do it for sure. Is to make sure that you're being authentic in everything that you do. Have a
yeah,
policy, but
okay,
have it so
yeah,
that you live it. Have
yeah,
conversations. If you're lucky enough to have a vulnerable leader, get them to be comfortable talking about the fact that they're accommodated. And that kind of
yeah,
leadership and having a situation where you know that someone else has received a reasonable accommodation, that is, I think, the best way to go about it.
yeah, yeah. So that that the accommodations are being made at work.
Exactly. And it becomes
Yeah,
normal. Make it part of
yeah,
induction. Make it part of your everyday. Make it a part of each separate performance management that you do. Because we might sometimes ask that as managers, how are you doing? Is there anything that you need? But are we really waiting for the answer, or are we just hoping to God they say, oh yeah, it's grand?
yeah, yeah.
Are
And how
we
to
are
deal with
we
it if they
actually,
say, yes, actually, there is something I do need.
yeah.
No, this is it. This is it. And you're so right about
And
that
not just how to
authentic
deal with it, but
culture
also just,
and
like
vulnerable
your
leaders.
reaction. Do you know what I mean? If the first thing your
Mm.
manager says is, oh no,
It's like maybe he's not the right manager for me.
possibly, or what you usually say to yourself is not the right organization for me,
Oh,
because
actually, yeah,
you know the
yeah, yeah.
way
Wrong manager, wrong
we
organization.
leave
I'm out of
we
here.
leave organizations, but we're really leaving managers.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. This is it.
And you'll find
Um,
that in you'll find that
Seònaid,
most
anything else?
organizations where there is openness, I was just saying there, Aoife, most organizations where there is openness, that's what makes all the difference. And you can
Yeah,
actually
yeah, yeah, yeah,
feel that.
yeah,
You can feel
yeah.
that the
And I
minute you
think
walk in the door.
it's important because I've worked in places before where one of their core values was openness, but actually it wasn't like to me, openness is something very different than the behaviors that I saw in that organization. So going back to what you had said earlier, it's about what the lived experience is rather than just what they say it is or what's written in the policy or something like that. Um, Anything else to share before we wrap things up today?
Just, I love the idea of being happier at work. This is where we're at now. After the pandemic has
Yeah,
made us question what's important in life, I think that's what's powerful.
yeah,
And with this
yeah,
pandemic creating disabilities across all different types of ages, and all different types of ethnicities, I think we need to embrace the fact that there is going to be a mental health crisis coming down the track to us.
yeah,
And
yeah,
Sea
yeah,
Change are a
100%.
great resource. Sea Change
Yeah.
have a
And
fantastic
we
workplace program.
and we have that linked in the show notes of the podcast. So if you're listening to the podcast, there's a link to Sea Change in the show notes as well. And with this pandemic, I was trying to, I suppose, see it as an opportunity. One of the opportunities being I can work from anywhere. I'm currently in Tenerife. I'm really enjoying the sunshine. I've been here nearly 2 weeks now. I've got another 2 weeks to go. It's been really great. I had COVID before Christmas, so it's really helped with my recovery. I still had a few issues breathing and stuff like that before I came over, but certainly since I've been here, been in the warmth and the sunshine, it's really made a huge difference to me.
Yeah, I hear you. We have to look after ourselves. I, for one,
Yeah,
am loving legless life. I'm sitting here totally legless, not a leg on, but I have my arm and all my devices and whatever else I need. And who else, we have to be comfortable. There's no way
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
going
yeah,
back ever to the commutes I used to do. Life is too short.
yeah. Exactly. This is it. This is absolutely 100%. Brilliant. So we'll leave it there. We're over 15 minutes now at this stage. So we'll leave it there for today. Thank you everyone who tuned in live. If you are watching the replay, feel free to ask questions below. You can tag either myself or Seònaid, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you have as well.